Lord Kagemitsu Daigo is awaiting his wife to go through the procedure of giving birth, while he remembers an event back in time when he had turned to the demons of the Hall of Hell for seeking power that would be the last savior of Daigo's land. Despite the backlash of an old man at the temple, Daigo still proceeded to secure a deal with 12 demons after brutally murdering the old head. Back at Daigo's place, his wife succeeds in giving birth to their first son. But as everything comes at a price, the demons waste no time in retrieving what was theirs according to the deal, and take away the boy's limbs, facial features, and even his skin. Even after such an evil act, the boy is left alive with the possible sacrifice of a statue, and even then, Daigo's wife, Nui no Kata, tries to convince Daigo into keeping the child since the kid is still their blood despite how he looks. Blinded by evil, Daigo shows no mercy and sends a housemate to dispose of the kid at a river. The maid leaves the kid in the hands of his luck, and as the boat flows with the river, an old man named Biwamaru looks at this act of cruelty as he slays a ghoul. We move 16 years forward in time, and we get to meet a kid named Dororo, who had gotten into some trouble with 3 men after he stole some of their things. We meet with Daigo's son again, who has turned into a young man functioning on prosthetic limbs, as he arrives in the same village Dororo is getting beaten at. The show gives up a little taste of what's upcoming when a demon pops out in the middle of the river and consumes the 3 men before the young man jumps in and defeats it with the weapons hidden in his prosthetic limbs. The demon receives a seemingly normal end, but fate hints at the journey that is awaiting the young man when a miracle happens and his skin grows back, leaving Dororo in shock. Back at Daigo's land, a demon statue gets split in half by lightning, and even though Daigo has a second son named Taomaru now, Nui no Kata still misses her firstborn son. After seeing the young man fight, Dororo decides to accompany him on his journey, and while the two are traveling, he comes to realize that the guy is unable to see, hear, or talk. The young man helps catch some fish for the pair to have dinner, and we get to know about how despite not having his eyes, the young man is capable of seeing things by the color of their souls. The next morning, Dororo comes up with a plan to make some money for their traveling expenses, and he takes the young man to a village, offering to slay a common demon there with the young man's fighting skills. The villagers accept the offer, and our duo is told to stay in a shed before they can meet up with the village chief named Bandai. Dororo gets shocked when a demon holding a bell comes into their shelter, but despite Dororo screaming at him to fight, the young man lets the bell demon slip away and refuses to move a muscle. Our pair is brought to Bandai, who turns out to be a beautiful woman on the next day, but while Dororo is mesmerized by her beauty, the young man pulls his sword out to attack the lady. Our boys are thrown into confinement for now, where they come across Biwamaru, whom we had met earlier in the story. The old man is revealed to be blind and capable of looking at souls just like the young man, and before the conversation could go any further, the young man decides to kill a demon and rush for Bandai again. Biwamaru leads Dororo while the young man pulls up on Bandai, who is revealed to be a demon all along. The chase continues for a little while, but the young man successfully slays the demon of Bandai, and we get to know how the villagers had been feeding travelers to Bandai just to have a source of income for themselves. Biwamaru joins the duo as they're leaving the village, and a couple of minutes into the walk, the young man reveals his name Yakimaru to the other two. Bandai was involved in the demon pact with Daigo, so her execution returns Yakimaru's central nervous system or his ability to feel pain to him. And on Daigo's land, trouble starts to arrive for the evil lord as he is informed about the opposing Sakai clan preparing for war against them. We move away from our duo for a while towards the story of a man named Dr. Jukai. Jukai was crucifying soldiers under the rule of an evil ruler when he finally jumped off a cliff after having had enough. Jukai had gotten saved in the village and was taught about how to treat people and make prosthetic items for the human body. Jukai was suffering from the guilt of what he had been doing all his life for Lord Shiba, when he came across Daigo's infant, whom he started to raise after giving him prosthetic body parts. 6 years pass by after Jukai had found the boy, and he gives him the name Yakimaru before teaching him about life. By this time Taomaru had been born and was receiving training from his father, while Jukai taught Yakimaru how to fight and survive in the wild. Yakimaru had killed a fair amount of monsters as he grew up, but one day when he killed a lizard demon, one of his legs grew back, and that miracle explains to Jukai how this kid can attract demons that stole his body parts in the past. After raising the kid and teaching him about life, Jukai finally says goodbye as Yakimaru leaves on his lonely journey of getting his body back. After the big reveal from the past, we move back to the present where Yakimaru is testing his sense of pain while Jukai is giving the corpse of a deceased warrior some prosthetics before both of them prepare to face the fate awaiting them. Our pair continues their journey after separating from Biomaru when they come across a girl named Osushi at a shelter. Hyakimaru is experiencing his first rain when Dororo comes to know about how the girl is looking for her lost brother who had left her 5 years ago. The peace that the rain had brought does not stay very long, as Hyakimaru notices an evil aura in the forest and rushes towards it to find a man who was killing people with his cursed sword. Hyakimaru takes the man on and barely manages to save himself from falling off a cliff when he somehow uses his prosthetic leg to snatch the sword away from the madman. Dororo heads to look for Hyakimaru's leg while we come across the shocking news of the cursed sword user being Osushi's long-lost brother. Dororo ends up making contact with the sword that pulls him towards Tanosuke, Osushi's brother, who eagerly waits for the demonic blade as his thirst for blood rises. A little backstory reveals how Tanosuke was actually a samurai working under a cruel lord who made him kill people with the demonic Nihiru sword, which led to Tanosuke's mind getting corrupted. Dororo arrives at the town where even though Hyakimaru knocks the sword out of his hands, the Nihiru sword still manages to reach Tanosuke, who is ultimately slayed by Hyakimaru in their second and final battle. Tanosuke's death results in Hyakimaru's sense of hearing coming back, while back at the Daigo's land, Kagemitsu Daigo turns out to be aware of Hyakimaru's possible existence, as he had already sent detectives to gather intel about the baby. The return of his hearing makes things out of balance for Hyakimaru, who is not used to this sense, and he ends up getting in a lot of trouble with a monster bird. Our boys are saved by Biomaru, who happens to be around to join them again, and on the next morning, a beautiful song attracts Hyakimaru towards the river, where our boys meet a girl named Mio for the first time. Biomaru's arrival also reveals that the travelers were in the Sakai territory that is about to go under war, and Mio decides to take the three to a ruined temple nearby, where she's staying with multiple orphans. Mio seems to be working at a mysterious job, and after she sings a song for Hyakimaru the next morning, Biomaru, who had gone scouting, reveals that he has found a better place for the orphans to move towards. The biggest problem with the new place was that it was under a demon, but Hyakimaru decides to take care of it despite being wounded. Hyakimaru decides to fight the demon where, despite his best attempt, he ends up getting his actual leg bitten by the demon, only for Biomaru to jump in and save him. While Hyakimaru was on his own quest of fighting the demons, Mio's song lures Dororo to come across the saddest reveal in the whole show, when it turns out that Mio had actually been selling her body to the soldiers for money all this time. This scene is actually sad enough to make a grown man cry. Moving on, Mio returns from work to help wounded Hyakimaru at the temple, who had lost his leg but had gotten his voice back. Dororo starts to feel even worse as the orphans have no idea about how exactly Mio is managing their food. While Hyakimaru is living every moment of his life suffering, his brother Taomaru keeps acting like a spoiled brat as Daigo is not letting him join the war, and that tends to bother him. Back at the temple, Mio helps Hyakimaru get used to his new senses with her song, and she leaves the temple when it turns out that she knows about Dororo being aware of her work. With the dream of having her own place and rice paddy one day, Mio leaves, and Hyakimaru, who had gotten some scavenged swords from the orphans, successfully defeats the demon the second time. The war starts to pick up pace, and when our boys are returning back to the temple, the sadness in Mio's arc does not stop as we see the horrifying scene of Mio and the orphans being mortally wounded by the Daigo troops. Hyakimaru loses it after hearing Mio's voice and keeps destroying the troops until Dororo tells him to calm down. With a heavy heart, the boys continue their journey after giving Mio and the children a proper burial in honor of their lives. The demons continue to pop up in our guys' journey as they get involved with a spider demon this time around. The demon escapes somehow after trapping Hyakimaru, and due to the lack of energy, he faints, only to be found by a local villager named Yajiro. The demon had taken the form of a beautiful woman who Yajiro takes home, where he named her Ohagi. Ohagi is rather shocked by Yajiro's behavior towards her, as he treats her nicely and gives her human food to eat. Yajiro's behavior changes Ohagi's opinion of him, as she refuses to eat him despite starving for human flesh. As Ohagi had been getting weaker and weaker with time, Yajiro decided to take her out of the village, where they got trapped between our boys and the local soldiers. Ohagi manages to dodge Hyakimaru as she gets out after defeating the troops for now. Our lovebirds manage to reach the exit for the village, but as they are discussing what to do now, the local troops arrive and end up wounding Yajiro while charging. Ohagi was unable to see Yajiro in this state, and hence she takes her actual form to defeat all the troops by the time our boys arrive. Even though you'd expect another battle here, Yakimaru lets Ohagi go this time, as the evil in her soul had completely disappeared from her time spent with Yujiro, and both of the pairs go on their own ways. The demons had been surging in that era a lot, as a demon called Forsaken Cloud had been creating trouble for a nearby village. Our guys are on their way when we get to see men from the same village taking a woman to the top of the mountain. A little boy named Saru tries to stop the men by shooting an arrow, but he's interrupted by our guys. Saru reveals the whole scene of how the villagers are at the mercy of the demon and have been providing girls as sacrifices for their own safety. Saru reveals that his non-blood related sister was picked for this year, and he requests our guys to help him take down the demon. Our guys take on the job to help Saru, but when the three reach Saru's sister at the top of the mountain, despite the demon's aggression, Yakimaru fails in doing anything as he is unable to differentiate the cloud from the actual centipede demon. Saru's sister ends up sacrificing herself in the end to save her brother, but even after such a setback, the boys refuse to give up and come up with another plan. They set the demon on fire later on after luring him in, but that plan does little to no damage. Luckily for our heroes, Yakimaru learns to adapt and starts using his hearing to detect the demon. As the demon was too big to be judged accurately, Dororo jumps into action and directs Yakimaru with his voice to ultimately help him in killing the demon. Saru reunites with his sister, who was still arriving, and our boys leave the area with a little surprise for Dororo at the end, as Yakimaru calls him by his name for the very first time. Our duo's journey slows down a little as Dororo ends up falling down with a serious fever. Yakimaru takes him to a nearby village where a priestess offers to treat the kid. In a delirious state, Dororo looks at a red flower that makes him remember his past. We get to know about how Dororo was living well as his father was the leader of a small clan. The family was living a good enough life as their clan was progressing at the very least. Fate had other plans for them, however, as the second in command of their clan, named Itachi, decides to betray his own people and joins the sides of a different warlord, ripping Dororo's father of both his men and his clan. Dororo spent a little while hiding around with his parents when his father also ended up dying in a battle while trying to protect his family. Dororo's mother tried her best to keep her child alive and went through some heartbreaking events that they were forced into due to starvation. Dororo's mother's health was also not really stable while she was trying to survive out in the wild, as she also ended up leaving the poor kid in a field of the same red flowers. Back at the temple, some time had passed and the priestess had successfully managed to nurse Dororo back to health. The duo prepared to continue their journey again, but with a little twist this time as the priestess revealed that Dororo was actually a girl all along. The chaos continues as we see fishermen getting devoured by a crab-like demon, and the situation for Daigo's land was starting to get worse day by day, as the land was getting affected by some serious drought in the area for the past 2 months. In despair, Daigo heads to the Hall of Hell to seek some answers, where he gets to know about Yakimaru being actually alive, with a strong sense of vengeance. While Daigo was having his own problems, Taomaru tries to interfere with his father as he gets to know about Daigo looking for a child. The curiosity does not let Taomaru stay as he decides to look further into the matter with 2 of his guards named Hyogo and Mutsu alongside him. He ends up coming to the same village that was being affected by the crab demon earlier on and accepts the locals' request to defeat the demon. The idiotic child steps into a fight with the demon, but his plan ends up failing badly as the crab is almost impossible to beat in deep water. With some motivation from the Daigo, Taomaru gives things another try when he tries and successfully draws the demon into shallow water. The demon still turns out to be not an easy kill when it's about to devour Hyogo as well, but the day gets saved by Yakimaru's extraordinary fighting skills. With the job finished, Taomaru is returning back to his place as the 2 brothers stare into each other's eyes as they wonder about who the other one really is. Taomaru ends up confronting our pair when he learns Yakimaru's name for the very first time after he helps him with the direction of the Daigo land. Our duo arrives at the city where they meet with Biomaru again at the local play, and he leaves the boys after having a word for the Hall of Hell to seek some answers. The guards let Daigo in on the whole situation, and after realizing his son is alive, he decides to kill Yakimaru himself in order to protect his land. Taomaru starts to put the pieces together, and our boys head for the remains of Fort Banman, where they meet a kid named Sukeroku who is trying to cross the border to enter the Asakura territory and reunite with his family. The night arrives, and while Yakimaru is fighting the 9-tailed fox, Sukeroku tries to run but ends up getting captured by the troops. Yakimaru's fight with the fox is interrupted when his own father, who had abandoned him 16 years ago just for the sake of his domain, pulls up on him with his force just to take whatever's left for Yakimaru away from him as well. The revenge story of Yakimaru continues, who now stares his father right in the eye as he stands in the way of Yakimaru's vengeance for the sake of getting his own body back from the evil demons.